So we hold quarterly chapter events in cities throughout the world. We're down in 7 cities. St. Louis is one of them. San Francisco, New York, London, Singapore, Dallas. I may have missed one, but we're delighted tonight to have VRSTL here. They're going to be presenting to us on how to turn VR buzz into value. So with that, I will turn it over to Tom, who is the CEO of VRSTL, and he's going to educate us tonight. So thanks.
All right. So, although it's one thing with the whole field that we're looking at here now, it's so new, I never assumed that I know more than anyone else in the audience. But I'm Tom Nickel, as Nathan said, CEO of VRSTL. Joined by my colleague here who's doing the tech support, co-founder and our creative director, Greg Hammond. And he's getting one of the toys working that we're going to show in just a few minutes.
It's always exciting to show up and hit the ground running with a hardware demo.
Yeah, so just we'll pretend a little Wizard of Oz here. Just ignore what's going on behind the curtains here for now. And
if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll tap dance.
Yeah, so several of you may have been in some of these other Venture Cafe sessions on virtual reality and augmented reality, where we've been hearing about how it's being used, what's being done, what the current status of the field is. What Greg and I want to talk about a bit is how it can then be used. And we'll talk about some of the what's, but the how to increase engagement with customers, how to just get more involvement, and even if you're in a situation where you're looking for ongoing engagement and even enhancing customer retention. First, just a little bit about us. VRSTL is a studio here in St. Louis, creating original, what we view to be cutting-edge experiences for corporations, nonprofits, brands. We're all about being across platforms, and you'll see where that comes into play as we talk further. But our mission really is to turn this VR buzz into measurable real-world results. So what are the challenges we see? Well, one of them is there's a lot of hype around VR, and yet there just aren't that many devices. And so what do you do if you're looking to develop for VR when you're looking at an install base, not in the millions, but in the hundreds of thousands of potential devices to even use what you're creating? And this creates several other issues. Well, one of them that even narrows the field even further, and a lot of what we've seen talked about at these sessions here, it's a lot of talk around games for the consumer market. And VR is wonderful for games. But not everybody plays games, and certainly not everybody plays games all the time. Now there's another aspect getting a lot of play, and that's with things like Google Cardboard with 360 video. People say, oh, I know VR. I've looked at video on a cardboard. It's cool. It's also linear. It's also something you do one time and rarely come back and do again. So that's not all that VR can be. Some would argue it's not necessarily even VR. But so that's an aspect. But again, when we look at the install base of what's out there, there are a whole lot of cardboards out there. But that's really not what we're talking about with what the future is here, or even the current. So if I am a corporation and I'm looking to get into doing something with VR or even augmented reality, but focusing on the VR piece here for now, why am I going to put a lot of money into it when there are only a handful of people who might be using it, and those who are using it may not even be in the core target markets that we are trying to reach? So there's a big issue here around where we're seeing investment in VR. And then this whole issue of boredom, we wanted to point this out because I have a teenage daughter. She doesn't come to me and say, gee, Dad, I can't figure out what to do, because she has one of these devices as well as others. And what we find with so many of us, there's just not the, hey, what do we want to do today? Well, let's go to the zoo, or let's go to the ball game. Now that obviously happens, but we may need to work at it more to overcome that feeling that so many people have of being so busy and so occupied and so stimulated. so much. So we wanted to point that out as part of this is how this all fits in. And to put it in another context here, which, what if, as Jeremy Bayless, who is at Stanford, has said here, he's someone who has a lot of ideas presented to him, and he's gone so far as to make this statement, which is out of 20 ideas that come to him for VR, 19 of them never should be done in VR anyway. If you think back, and some of us in the room here are old enough to remember when there wasn't an internet, when websites were first created, most of the websites, we call them brochureware. You say, oh, well, I have a brochure, I have a booklet, I have something, I'll make a website. It was the paradigm that we knew, and we're seeing a lot of this with these technologies now as well. A paradigm that we know certainly is games. So what can we do to make a game in VR? Well, we're looking, and you can see what I've hinted at here is with engagement. There's a marketing aspect, there's a customer engagement aspect. What can we do with those to use these technologies in ways that are really appropriate to the technology? So this is where we see the challenges as being. So when we look at solutions, one of the first concepts we want to put out here is this of multi-platform. I focus a lot on VR. When I say that, I'm also thinking some about AR, but there's a lot of augmented reality that's able to happen with our mobile devices now. We don't have to have a setup like this with the headset and all to do AR as we do now with VR. And yet, what if we have solutions that start with the solution and it being available on whatever devices people have access to? So it's an experience you can create for a smartphone, but it also happens to be for other devices. So if someone has a VR device, they can engage in that experience that way and get a true VR enriched experience. One reason for this is if we look at North America statistics alone here, by the end of the year there may be 1 million VR systems. That's been the projection. That actually was the projection if the Oculus Rift came out in the spring, or earlier in the spring rather than later in the spring. That's not a big install base. But Sony's coming out in October, is the projection, with the PlayStation VR. That's an install base of 14 million that by Christmas could bring that many more people in with those units. But what does just about everybody have? We're at over 180 million smartphone users in the US. These circles are not even to scale. So you can see with what we're looking at with the current platform availability, where we can be focusing and then thinking back rather than what so much of the thinking is, what can we do here, and then see what can be done on these other devices. We'd argue that that's worth thinking about. It may be the backwards way of looking at it. Another aspect of this, let's be thinking about what can be on-site and what may be off-site. And what do we mean by that? Well, let's say you have a public venue. I already mentioned the zoo. Or let's say you have a brand people use in specific situations. What can be done in that situation, call it on-site, and that is much more likely to be a strictly mobile solution or an augmented or mixed reality kind of solution. And then when they're no longer on-site with you, or when they're no longer directly engaged with your brand, then maybe take them into the other world, the virtual world, and engage with them there. You're engaging with them in much more of their total experience that way, and again, across devices and across experiences. And then lastly, the other concept we want to put out for us to think about here is, what if with this you can add a content management solution? What do we mean by that? Well, let's say you can refresh the content within the experience without them having to buy a new version or download a new version, but the content is just updated. What can that content be? It can be anything, really. I mean, it can be new information, it can be different graphical or creative presentation of whatever is in there.
New ad campaign content.
You can also have tracking then with that. So in the same system, you can be tracking where the users are, what they're seeing, what they're then engaging with. And with that, of course, then changing out the way branding may be done within that as well. And this is all technology that currently exists as well. So why not apply it within this realm? So what we're going to do is, with those general concepts, talk specifically about a handful of methods here, and I'm just going to go ahead and list them, and then we're going to give some use cases that point it out. And when we get into that, what we'd really like to do is, if you have any questions or comments, let's just start making it very interactive here. I've just been talking to kind of get the context here, but we want to get to where this turns more into a conversation. So one method is with aspirational content. You can see some examples that we have here. And actually, Greg, why don't you comment on just what you were saying as we were on the way over about the gamification?
Right, so this is a buzzword that's been around for a while now that you've probably heard, gamification. And for a game developer like me, who's been doing it since the early 80s, it's sort of like nails on the chalkboard, because I don't like that word, because usually it means bad things. Usually it means somebody put a bingo game or a tic-tac-toe game on their website, and that's gamification. In this case, what we're really talking about is applying proven game concepts to real-world business cases and getting traction, getting engagement, getting repeat visits, whatever it is that your business goal is that you're trying to solve, from those mechanics that we build in. And it's the same ones whether you're playing World of Warcraft, or you're playing Clash of Clans, or you're playing even Candy Crush, right? So these are games that everyone knows about, at least if you haven't played them, you know what they are. What makes those games successful? Why do people play them so much and so often? What's the repeat engagement mechanism? And it's those very things that we're going to talk about here. So you collect things as you play these games, and it's a virtual collectible. It's not a physical object. You have a character that grows and gets better over time, and we can apply these methods to on-site. You want to take it from here?
Sure, yeah. So you can be thinking of the games concept specifically. It can also be to actually create events. That can, again, if you're thinking in terms of on-site, and we're going to get into some use cases here, but and one of them is with the zoo. So let's say you're on-site at the zoo. What kind of events could you create there that you would actually engage with through whatever platform you happen to be engaging with it at the time? And those events can be in the form of a game as well. It doesn't have to be. Aspirational awards, so points with badges or different kinds of rewards, or even prizes that actually have some real world value to them. Those are tried and true ways of motivating different kinds of behavior. The notion of intelligent agents, fitting the context, and this is part of where the content management system I mentioned comes in as well. So you are in a new situation within this environment. Well, somebody can appear who is a guide or an expert or a celebrity that you could actually engage with. You can even include some forms of artificial intelligence so that there's a give and take, a question and answer kind of approach as well. Quests, Greg just alluded to that. If you send people off on a scavenger hunt, it could be a virtual kind of scavenger hunt. I find as I'm talking, it sound very general in some ways. As I say, we're going to get into some specifics, but I want to keep it more general here because it opens up all kinds of creativity with what a quest can be, or any of these others that we're mentioning here. And then finally, kind of an obvious one that we hear a lot about is branded games. So we don't want to leave that out either, because that is certainly a possibility. So all of these, of course, can leverage social media, be built on the content management system idea that I mentioned, be evergreen. We see this as one of the possibilities here too, so that if you've invested in this kind of engagement,
You don't want it to be a one-off.
Yeah.
You
So
want it to be something that sticks around, has persistence, and can evolve over time. Most ad campaigns, especially interactive ones, last 3 months at best. And that's a lot of money to put into something that you get a limited amount of traction from, engagement from, and then the attention span of your audience goes somewhere else, and the newness of what you've offered begins to wear off. But if it's more of an evergreen property that you can update through a content management system, new content, new features, that's really what we're talking about here. And it's a game changer because you're not talking about a one-off effort anymore. You're talking about a platform that you can rely on to continue to engage, especially as we know that people who go out and buy an Oculus Rift or even a Gear VR for their Samsung phone, or even a cardboard for that matter, if they start using VR, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Right now, it's actually weird. It's like there's this dearth of places and things to do when you get your VR gear, your VR headset. But
So
as
think
those
about
people start coming online, you can engage them as they come online, as they get that gear, that headset. You give them a place to go, and it's always there, and it's always getting better.
So think about all of these as being available on a single platform that you could use. Don't pull out whatever tool you want at a time. And so let's get into some specifics. So Greg, why don't you pick it up?
Sure.
Here, I'll walk it through.
All right.
But, so the first is with, think about public venues and being on site.
Right. So in this case, we're really going to give an example of if you were to go to, let's say, a zoo. Where's the zoo is? Where's the zoo? And we're at the St. Louis Zoo, and one of the things we really want to preserve for on-site experiences is the authenticity of that on-site experience. We're not going to get in the way of the user's enjoyment of why they went there in the first place. And this is a big mistake that we see a lot of developers, a lot of enterprises out there making, is they think, oh, we'll give them a VR app that they can use at the zoo in this case. What? I don't want to be shielded and separated from why I'm there in the first place. I want to actually go to the zoo to see animals and have some sort of enhanced experience, and that's really what we're talking about here. So we're not going to get in the way. So you show up at the zoo, you've got the mobile app, and notice we're not talking about anything with VR or AR yet, we're just a mobile app. Lots of people have mobile phones, smartphones, as we said earlier, and you get your barcode scan just like you were paying for your coffee at Starbucks with your app. And what happens is the back end goes, oh yeah, that person doesn't have today's animal yet, so let's give them an African elephant, because that's the animal they get to collect. And that's the virtual collectible for the day. So they get it, and now they can also use the app at the zoo on site, in this case, to play games, go on quests, and interact with this new collectible that they just picked up. And notice that all of these things enhance the experience, but they're not getting in the way. They're just making it cooler. If you've got kids and you have an app, a smartphone, you know, they're going to actually have more fun. They're going to want to go to the zoo more often because of this, because there's something new to do every time they go. There's a different animal to collect every time they go to the zoo. And then they can also earn aspirational rewards. So let's show an example of what this looks like. So here we are, we're using our smartphone at the zoo. We've picked up the elephant. In this case, the elephant is an augmented reality projection. We've got our guide here as an intelligent agent. And anywhere the family goes in the zoo, that elephant is following the child around because it's always there. And that's the on-site experience that we're really looking to deliver through our platform, so that it gives that family a reason to go back more often than they would otherwise. And this is one of the biggest issues with venues like this is audience engagement. You go once every, what, a year, 2 years, 3 years maybe? And this gives a family with kids a reason to go back several times every summer, or maybe more often if they want to collect more animals. Also, we haven't mentioned this yet, but it also offers them a monetization opportunity to say, oh, you couldn't make it to the zoo this month? Well, you can buy the African elephant for $1 or $5, whatever the price point is. And that's like printing money, because it costs the zoo, in this case, nothing to offer a virtual collectible like this. It's in the database. They sell it, they make money. It's pretty much pure no overhead on that. Then they go home, and we lose the audience that went to the zoo at that point. Okay, they had a great time. There's that afterglow. Oh, wasn't it great? It was awesome. I saw the elephant. I saw the cheetah. You ever seen the cheetah at the zoo? It's very elusive. I don't see them very often when I go there. That's another thing we can do, by the way. We can enhance the exhibit so that if you have the cheetah, Even if he's not there, you get information about him and you can see him walking around some bush. We go home, and this kid has his PlayStation VR. I'm not sure how he got it because it's not coming out until October, but there he is. And his elephant that he collected at the zoo that day is now, he's interacting with it in the Amboseli Reserve in Africa, in Tanzania and Kenya. And he's having a unique experience that he could only get from having gone to the zoo, getting the collectible, going home, firing up his VR game, and managing his wildlife reserve. And so it's a really powerful form of engagement off-site. And notice at this point, we're fine if the eyes are covered and all they're doing is immersed in a VR experience, because that's a good place to do that. We don't ever want them walking around and covering up their vision when they're outside. So that's one example.
So on that, and with these examples, these are not fully developed concepts. I'm going to give that caveat here. This is just to give a sense as to the kinds of things that can be done to put all these different pieces together to create an overall experience. That again, in this case, this is a situation where someone would actually go to a site and hopefully, in the case of the zoo, they stay engaged when they're off-site.
So we're sharing some ideas with you that are in the ideation stage. We are actively developing a number of these, but this is not one of them yet. So, okay.
All right. So the second use case would be let's switch to another kind of venue that can be which is the Science Museum.
So our lead developer grabbed some assets on the Unity asset store. We're a Unity shop. And he grabbed a space station, he grabbed planet Earth. And what you're seeing here floating around is actually a Vive controller. The HTC Vive is one of the premier VR headsets out there. And he made it so that there's no gravity, and we can pull ourselves through this space station in zero gravity. And he took a day to do this, just to mock up a concept of what could we do with these assets, what kind of experience could we deliver. And one of the ideas we're working on internally is a space station simulator that would be more mission-based. You're doing real science. You're solving problems that come up on the spot, and it's meant to be a more serious simulation than a lot of the stuff that we're working on. But it shows what's possible. I mean, here in just a day's work, he was able to give us a glimpse of what it would be like to navigate a space station in zero gravity. And in a moment here, we're going to go out. And at this point, when we put this video together, we hadn't done anything with the textures on the outside of the station, so it looks pretty plain. But the core concept is you can see where this idea can go, right? You're living on a space station, you're doing real science, you're handling emergencies as they come up, and you're immersed.
Well, with that, if, for instance, this were with the Science Center, or if it were for science education, you can insert experiments in here. And that's part of the Quest idea, too, is, okay, this week's or this month's experiment is to grow plants in zero gravity in space. And you could actually walk through steps and be presented with different problems, different scenarios to do, and see how it turned out, and repeat it and continue to do better, and then get another one to do another time.
Right. The platform basis enables us to do that because we're always adding content to the system. It's not a ship it once and forget about it kind of experience. And that's obviously the world we live in is mobile apps where we're always getting free updates to whatever it is that we've done. But in this case, we're really talking about adding new content that's mission-oriented and gives people more to do than just the same old thing that they've done already. So here's another example. It's a branded game that we've been working on and called Fusion Ball. And we would love to show it to you on our Alienware over here, but the Alienware doesn't seem to be cooperating. I'm not quite sure what's going on. We'll figure it out. So the idea is if you took the classic game Breakout with a paddle and the ball and knocking the bricks out from above the ball, this game is around, what, in the 80s or 90s? It's a really simple game concept. What we've done is we've taken that 2D presentation and turned it this way, and now your face is the pattern. And you move around and you can get this guy to cooperate. We'll show you and let you play it. And you've got to keep this ball in play and knock out all the bricks. And you're working inside this box-shaped play area. And we developed this game to engage some of the bigger agencies out there that are looking for help with their clients to get VR done. And so we give it a Mountain Dew brand treatment, and we're actually talking to the agency for Mountain Dew to explore that opportunity. So, do you have the video? Okay, well, we'll show you the video on another device then. Yeah, the plan was to show it off here. Whoa. Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. So with that, what kinds of questions do you guys have? And when you ask your question, maybe you can give us just a little bit of background to let us know who you are and what you're doing and why you're interested in VR. That's scary. Yes?
So I struggle with trying to understand different applications of VR. And I think that, it is challenged by the fact that it's so related to games. So trying to think outside in terms of other applications. Maybe you can talk about this.
Sure.
So for instance, are there applications in either what I'll call the medical field, where
Absolutely.
the surgeon can figure out,
Yeah.
here are two different things that I'm going to have a problem with,
Yeah.
and how to fit it, or in city government where a fireman and a policeman go through rules and so forth to figure that out. So that's where I'm trying to figure out how it jumps from games to really a training and development channel.
Good, great question.
Occupational therapy to the question.
Yeah, great question. Those are all fields that are actually actively being explored in both augmented and virtual reality right now. There are industrial strength augmented reality helmets that have been developed for training people in factory floors instead of using videos like they've been doing for years now, so that you're actually dealing with the hardware and it's telling you with an overlay what you should be doing and how to do it and what the pressure reading is as you're doing it. Medical, they recently did a live VR stream of a surgery in England, in London I believe it was. And it had a huge viewing audience. And so this was basically, you've got your Google Cardboard or your Gear VR or an Oculus Rift or HTC Vive, and you're basically able to watch as the surgery is going on, and they had a camera that has 6 lenses, or 6 pairs of lenses, streaming this thing live. There's a lot of work being done in medical training with VR already. And what we're finding out is that, in fact, everyone's predicting, that the analysts are predicting at this point that the use cases for VR are actually the non-game serious application of this technology is much more likely to be the prevalent use of this technology than just games. Games, you don't really want to do this for 6 hours a day, okay? Oh, look at that health and safety warning. Maybe that's why we're doing it. Let's see if I click through that. You don't want to be doing this for 6 hours a day. And that's what gamers are doing. They're spending 2, 3, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, hardcore gamers anyway, and they're doing this. Oh, look, my game's starting. I love it when it comes together. But for short periods of time, and especially for non-game applications, we're going to see this technology boom. And that's one of the reasons we're highlighting use cases like collectibles at an institution like a zoo to drive repeat visits and engagement. Advertising agencies using it to engage their audience. And again, our approach is a little bit different in 2 ways. One, we're really seeing VR as part of the solution, but not the only solution. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. If you can develop with Unity, for instance, to reach multiple platforms, anything from a smartphone up to an Oculus Rift, And certainly you vary the way the app works across those different targets, those different platforms, because it's not going to work the same way on a smartphone as it is on a high-end VR system, of course. But that means that our clients and the people we work with and the people who adopt this methodology are very much better off because they're not trying to shoehorn something into VR that really doesn't belong in VR in the first place. And likewise, they're able to leverage VR to extend that experience like we saw with the kid with the elephant, right? He didn't have a thing to do when he got home from the zoo before this, but now he has a reason to continue to interact with that brand and that content. And that's really the other part of it that I was going to mention is that it's an engagement solution for brands that are having a hard time keeping the attention of their audience.
So just to follow up on that, so if I were the director of marketing for the St. Louis Zoo, and I said, I love this idea, make it happen. Would I buy the hardware and software from you?
No, just the software. And then the consumer, the end user, has a smartphone, they have a computer, or a PlayStation. Well, PlayStation VR ships this fall in October. And there are, as you saw on the slide, 14 million in the US alone, North America, actually. There are 40 million PlayStation 4s that are capable of VR worldwide. And when that happens, and that technology reaches for $400, you can go out and buy VR that's completely immersive and has hand controllers, and that's really powerful. And those people who have those systems, and the families who go out and buy PlayStation VR this fall, whether it's a Christmas gift or whether they start using it in October when it first launches, that's going to jumpstart this entire technology revolution that's happening with VR. The reason it hasn't happened yet is because it's very expensive. Right? Oculus Rift is $600, plus the handful of controllers are probably another $150 or $200 when they come out later this year. HTC Vive, which is a computing technology, $800 out of the box. So this isn't going to, you're not going to have more than one of these in a house, first of all, and secondly, not everybody's going to go out and buy these right away because they're waiting for good content. So it's a chicken and egg problem right now.
And to that point, yeah, the zoo doesn't have to do any of that.
Right.
So it's the consumer market, and in some cases the professional markets too, that will be doing that. So what we would see doing is having a platform that since you mentioned the zoo, that they would say, well, here's what we want. They don't have to create all the software tools to make that happen. They actually could license, maybe modify slightly some that are already there, so they're not having that big capital investment to do that. That's why I mentioned, I didn't point it out as I went through that, but seeing it as a software as a service kind of model.
Right.
So all that back-end stuff is already there, the investment's already there, the zoo or whomever the client is can take what they want, customize it so they're really getting the functionality and the content that they want.
Yep. So more questions? I'm going to keep working on this as we talk.
I had a question, just really on the social networking aspect. So you showed a lot of the use cases, which seems pretty isolated, even with the elephant.
Right.
So my company, obviously, we do VR and we do social networking as part of VR.
Yeah.
So what we found with our research with people is that isolation is very off-putting. So have you thought about that as well, of having that as a social? So, you know, when they get this elephant, they can see that their friend Fred also got that. So when they get into VR, they can be with their buddies and start.
You know, our bad, we didn't actually even mention that because it's just sort of a part of the DNA. But yes, it's a broad spectrum solution that hits the users, the audience, everywhere they live. Social media, mobile phones.
But I don't know if you all could hear in the back, there's really a question about getting at the isolation. So much, I mean, you see when Greg puts that on, he acts like he's seeing us, but of course he's not. It becomes a very isolating kind of experience. So what about social media and the more social aspect of it, and can that interaction be with other people? So instead of isolation, it's actually helping you connect with more people, I think. And the answer is absolutely. I think that's what Greg meant by our bet. We didn't feature that here, but it's definitely a key part of what we have in mind, as well as You also, a key part of social media too is enhancing word of mouth and spreading the word and reinforcing positive messaging and even as a way to get more of the aspirational aspects of getting points, rewards, and all for more sharing and more involvement. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I had a more technical question. So have you been able to do the 90 frames per second, or have you found that difficult?
Getting high performance throughput is the question. How are we doing that to get enough frames per second to make it a comfortable experience for our users? And that really comes down to being smart as developers and having lots of experience, many user experience, already developing low polygon assets that have proper game development. This is where the game development expertise really pays off, because we're very keenly aware of keeping everything that we do as high performance as possible so that we're never dipping below 90 frames a second, and that way you're never getting judder, is what they call it, where
motion sickness.
Right, it's inducing motion sickness because you can't keep up with the motion of the person's head as it travels.
The only reason I asked was that space station that you showed, that looked like a higher poly asset.
It did, and yet it was using a lot of good tricks to achieve that effect, because it's using bump maps on simple polygon environments. And
Okay.
yeah, it was not as busy as it looked like. So yes.
So let's say the opposite of things. When you're talking about like solo inclusion being, an issue of type. So let's look at the problem completely opposite of it. Let's say if we had something that was like on a stick, and you brought it into a room and you put it in the middle of the room, and it turned all four walls into your virtual reality. And then you've got, let's say that, I saw that earlier. So let's say something like that, for instance, that you put on in any room, and then you shut the drapes or whatever, but you can turn that room, all the walls, into your virtual reality experience. And also integrating that with, real-time VR. So I know that like they can perform remote surgeries now, which is really incredible. It's awesome. So let's say that you take this stick idea, so you get away from the headset completely, and then now you've got a room, you can include a lot of people, and you've got VR, virtual reality in real time.
So that technology that you're describing has been around for a couple of decades now. It's called the Cave. It's been at MIT and other places, and it's a great solution when you do need to have several people in a room sharing the same experience. It's not a consumer-friendly technology yet because of the projection technology that's required to seamlessly project that imagery on the walls, and also the average consumer doesn't have a room in their house that really works well for that. So if I can just piggyback on that for a moment, one of the benefits that we have as Unity developers is that any popular platform that comes along, whether it's smartphone, computer with VR, mobile VR, especially as mobile VR becomes the dominant platform, which we expect it to be over the next 5 years, because you don't have cords. The thing that mobile VR is missing right now is this. It's a motion tracker, right? So you can't tell how close you are to something in a mobile VR solution yet because there's nothing that tracks that kind of motion. But as all of these platforms take off and as we get new ones to play with, Unity does the heavy lifting for us and gives us the APIs we need to address any platform that's sufficiently popular that people are using it in big numbers. So when that Cave concept takes off for the home, we'll be there. Yes?
I'm curious if there's any concrete case studies of any businesses or anyone in here that have used augmented reality in their business and like specific, this is how it helped my business.
There are, and there was an initial wave of augmented reality that happened starting about 5 years ago, 2011, augmented reality, because we started to get sufficiently powerful smartphones with cameras that could do augmented reality. Most of it was you focus your phone on a marker like a QR code on a piece of paper, and it transforms that into a robot or an elephant or something like that that isn't really there, but you're basically able to do this and see it from different angles, and it looks real. That's been the traditional use case for augmented reality. It falls into the one-off kinds of campaigns that we were talking about earlier, where because it was easy to do, You had a lot of agencies out there picking it up and going, let's do that, augmented reality.
Did I say augmented reality?
Yes, you did.
I meant virtual reality.
Okay.
But, or either. I mean,
Virtual reality is absolutely so new in the business world that there isn't enough research to base any studies on yet. We'll get there in a year or two, but we're in the wild, wild west just like everybody else, and we're trying to figure it out. The thing that we're doing differently, I think, is that we're not saying your app has to be VR or bust. And we think that that's a foolhardy approach right now, given that there's not enough audience out there, there's not enough eyeballs to justify that kind of approach for most businesses. Whereas if you can get them on a mobile phone all the way up to a VR headset, then you're going to be you're more likely to reach the audience that they expect to reach.
So I could point you real quick. If you go to thevrara.com, it's an association website, there are some case studies up there for VR. One of them that I thought was really interesting from one of our member companies out of Dallas. They built an experience for Jim Beam, and basically they took the perspective as you were whiskey as it was being distilled, and then it takes you through the distillery and then all the way to the process into a person's mouth, and from the perspective of that alcohol. And they took it into 200 different bars with VR headsets. They let people experience it, and you can imagine people were just immersed in the brand, and they saw solid lift in Jim Beam sales. So that was one of them, and then another one was this company out of Dallas did an experience for McDonald's Happy Meals, and basically kids got to go in and feel like they were inside of the Happy Meal. And there's some numbers on lift of people who then went to the store and the kids were begging for Happy Meals.
Those are pretty early days though for a lot of that stuff.
So my company's been doing a lot of research. My company's called ConextVR. We're doing a lot of research with the Microsoft HoloLens. So the HoloLens is augmented reality. So the difference between virtual and augmented reality is in virtual reality we can be somewhere.
Right.
In augmented reality, we teleport objects into your existing environment. So we've been doing things for banking, where you would have an ATM machine appear on a wall, and you can, look at all of your banking details and stuff like that.
I think we have time for a few more questions. Thank you. That's great. Yes.
I work for an educational broadcaster, and I'm interested in sort of outside of the medical stuff earlier, what you see as the potential for education and VR mixing.
So it's a tricky one because we don't really want kids who are too young using this stuff. I mean, it's sort of guideline is 13 years old, but even that is loose because we don't have enough physiological data yet that's been collected to know what it's doing to kids' eyes. Having said that, we know that young kids are going to use this just like they play Call of Duty earlier than they should. If you play Call of Duty and you've listened to the voice chat, you hear 6 and 7-year-old boys on there, and it's like, what are you doing? So we don't want to, hurt children with virtual reality when they may not have the self-discipline to say, I don't want to do this for more than 15 minutes at a time, right? So education is certainly a field that's ripe, especially for visual simulations, for using VR and augmented reality, but I would rather see more focus on augmented reality solutions with smartphones or tablets in the classroom than I would with lots of kids using VR for long periods of time. You're already seeing Google Cardboard in classroom settings where the teacher sends an image to all of the kids' smartphones that they have in the classroom, and they're all looking at the same thing at the same time. But that's a short-term thing. It's 5 or 10 minutes per session. It's not, hours at a time.
And not interactive.
Right.
What's been the crossover between AI and VR? Artificial intelligence, is there any marriage at all?
Just as there is with any computer simulation where AI plays a role, whether that's non-player characters in a game that are trying to find their path through a game, or whether it's an intelligent agent that's trying to answer your question intelligently and understand what you said, no matter what your accent. Those are things that you're going to see merge into VR and AR applications seamlessly, just as we would expect them to. but there isn't really, it's sort of apples and oranges in a way.
You don't compliment?
They do, they complement, but they don't, there's not an exclusive use case yet in VR for AI.
So one thing, I also run a company called Isle 411, and we're doing work with Project Tango, it's Google's augmented reality. And one of the use cases that we're working on with like adding AI is through an avatar guide through a building, and they start to learn and react to like how you navigate through buildings. And some of this is kind of like game functionality, and you can just set rules like if you get lost, they'll come back to find you. But adding AI into like kind of being a guide through any world is a really interesting concept.
Yes. And that's the intelligent agency that we're really talking about. And so you're going to see lots of use cases for that, just as you are across the spectrum of apps, regardless of whether they're VR or on a flat screen. But that's a great example. Anybody else before we wrap up? Thank you all so much. Yes?
I have a quick question. So I can kind of see in the future that AR would be maybe a part of your daily function. You know, I could see it being something that could potentially take place of your smartphone. You know, you go around throughout the town or whatever, and you have your augmented reality. And I'm just wondering if you really ever see virtual reality crossing that barrier, because it seems to me like I can't picture it really going past like a specific experience, something you go to do, you intentionally do it. It's never, I don't know, I just can't, I can't envision it being a part of a daily interaction.
That's a great point. Most analysts agree that augmented reality is actually going to be the winner in the long term, because as that gets better and better, it does not isolate the user from those who are around him or and the environment around him or her. And so we think VR will always have a role, but it's going to be, it is an isolating experience by nature. And so as augmented reality takes off, and as you get to the point where you're not really having to wear a big helmet on your head to experience it, at that point, I mean, we're starting to have the first smartphones come out with Project Tango technology in them now. And that is a game changer because it has more sensors, more cameras, it can measure distances, it knows, it can map a room in 3D and then interact with that room in augmented reality. As that kind of technology makes its way into more smartphones, you're going to see a very rapid shift in the way we experience the world around us and use smartphones to do it. We can give you a quick demo of the game that we've been working on.
Yeah, I'm going to show, it's a brief video, just so you get the idea of the game in action while Greg gets it set up.
It's going, but we're going to,
okay.
Because we won't have sound from this. So.
Okay, and so then we invite you, I know Nathan has gotten to play this some, it's really pretty cool. If you want to come up and immerse yourself into Fusion Ball, we can stick around. I don't think we have to move out of the room right at 7:30, so we can stick around with that and just let you have some fun with that too.
It'll give you a workout too.
I want to play.
Good. Come on.
Okay, here comes Fusion Ball.
So we've got that running here. Anybody wants to try it, welcome to come up and play. Thank you all very much.